What if the love you've always sought isn't the kind that comforts, but the kind that awakens? Carl Jung said that love is not a refuge, it's a mirror that reveals the shadow behind desire, the ego behind sweetness, the truth hidden in promises of eternity. Spirituality doesn't invite you to find someone to complete you. It invites you to become whole before surrendering yourself. True love isn't made of certainties, but of awareness. It doesn't promise happy endings, it promises growth. It's the kind of love that forces you to look inward, to see what passion tried to hide, to choose to stay even when the reflection is uncomfortable. This love doesn't destroy, it refines. It doesn't hold you back, it liberates you. And when it arrives, there's no going back to being the same. What you will discover here is not about finding the right person, but about finding a new way to love, more lucid, freer, truer. Because the love that transforms is not born from an encounter with another, but from a rediscovery of the self. And that is what Jung was talking about. The love that does not lull the soul to sleep, but awakens it. The love the world taught you is a beautiful but dangerous myth. They promised that one day someone would come to fill the void, as if the missing half were in another body. Carl Jung would say that this is one of the ego's greatest traps, confusing love with dependence. Love born from neediness doesn't heal, it numbs. True spirituality doesn't give you emotional crutches, it teaches you to walk with awareness. The awakened person understands that love is not a refuge, it's a mirror that shows everything you still avoid seeing. The shadow reveals itself through bonds, and that's where the true process of individuation begins. The ego wants guarantees, but the self wants growth. To truly love is to accept the risk of shedding fantasy to see reality. And reality sometimes hurts more than illusion. Even so, it's the only place where love can exist without masks. Paragraph 2, 20 lines. Those who love consciously don't seek completeness, they seek expansion. Love, in Carl Jung's view, is part of inner alchemy, the fire that transforms the lead of the ego into the gold of the soul. The person who negates themselves to be loved still lives imprisoned in projection, trying to find outside what they lost inside. And there is no spirituality in that. Mature love doesn't imprison, it liberates. It's the encounter between two beings who chose each other without needing to possess each other. To love is to be able to say, I don't need you to exist, but I choose to share my freedom with you. This awareness changes everything, because love ceases to be anesthesia and becomes a mirror. The self awakens, the shadow is seen, and the ego loses control. When you realize that to love is to allow the other to be, the fear of loss ceases to have power over you, and at that moment, something sacred begins to be born. Paragraph 3, 20 lines. Deconstructing romantic love isn't about giving up on love, it's about purifying it. It's about understanding that the soul doesn't seek a savior, it seeks a conscious reflection. Carl Jung would say that true love is that which arises between two individuals who have already found themselves. The ego wants fusion. The self wants connection without loss of essence. Conscious love is paradoxical. It unites without binding, reveals without hurting, transforms without destroying. It happens when the shadow ceases to be the enemy and becomes a bridge. What was once neediness becomes presence. Spirituality then ceases to be discourse and becomes living practice. Choosing to love without running away from oneself. To love without dissolving. It is at this point that love ceases to be human and becomes alchemical. And this inner fire is the portal that leads to the next stage of the journey. Carl Jung said that love is the fire that transforms the unconscious into consciousness. This is the essence of inner alchemy. The encounter between two beings becomes a spiritual laboratory where everything false begins to melt away. Love, from this perspective, is not a romantic emotion, but a process of purification of the soul. When you fall in love, the ego believes it has found someone special, but the self knows it has found a mirror, someone who will show you what still needs to be integrated. And it is in this friction between the ideal self and the real self that individuation happens. Spirituality doesn't want to keep you comfortable, it wants to awaken you. True love is not calmness, it is the heat that separates gold from impurity. It is the kind of fire that doesn't destroy, it refines. And like any alchemical process, it requires patience, surrender, and awareness. Imagine a relationship as an alchemical furnace. With each conflict, a part of the shadow is revealed. With each reconciliation, a part of the self manifests. This is the dance between the human and the divine. To love is to accept that the other awakens their demons not to punish them, but to liberate them. It is the ego being burned in the name of expanding consciousness. That is why Jung affirmed that relationships are instruments of spiritual evolution, not temples of perfection. When two people decide to grow together, spirituality takes shape in everyday life. A patient gaze, a word spoken with presence, a silence that welcomes instead of judging. This is the true gold of the soul, the wisdom that is born from friction. And it is in this friction that love becomes alchemy. Love, as psychic alchemy, doesn't seek perfection, it seeks truth. It demands that you face your own shadow with courage and tenderness. When the other person irritates you, awakens fear in you, or makes you feel small, it's the unconscious asking for integration. Inner alchemy transforms these shocks into opportunities for awareness. The ego screams, but the self observes. And little by little, what was once chaos becomes clarity. This is the power of love that Jung called the individuation process, using the bond as a mirror of the soul. Whoever understands this stops running from pain and begins to listen to what it teaches. Because love is not just an encounter between two bodies, it's the encounter between two processes of awakening. And it is precisely there, at this point of friction between pain and light, that love begins to reveal its true purpose. Possessive love is the most subtle disguise of fear. Most people confuse attachment with care, control with security. But Carl Jung would explain that what binds the other is not love. It's the ego's insecurity in the face of uncertainty. Authentic spirituality reminds us that true love can only exist where there is freedom. When you try to hold on to someone tightly, what you truly fear is the emptiness within yourself. Possession is born from a lack of individuation, from the fear of facing one's own shadow. To love is not to cling, it is to allow the other to be, even if that means they might leave. The ego says, "Stay with me." The self whispers, "Be free." Only when this difference is understood does love cease to be a prison and begin to become a path to consciousness. Anyone who has experienced possessive love knows how suffocating it can be. It all begins with small projections, the fear of loss, comparison, the need for control disguised as zeal. But the more the ego tries to secure love, the more it destroys it. Carl Jung said that the soul needs space to grow, and where there is domination, the self retreats. Free love, on the other hand, flourishes in trust. It doesn't need eternal promises, only real presence. It's a love that says, "I choose you, but I don't possess you." And this requires courage, because the ego hates what it cannot dominate. But it is in this conscious surrender that spirituality manifests itself, when the other ceases to be a mirror of neediness and becomes a reflection of freedom. Free love is not cold detachment. It is presence without imprisonment. It is understanding that love is not a contract, but a sacred encounter between two consciousnesses. Those who truly love know that the other is not property, but an expanding universe. And that is why Jung said that where there is power, there is a lack of love, and where there is love, power dissolves. Inner alchemy happens when you exchange control for trust, possession for presence. When this happens, love becomes a space where both breathe. And in this breath, individuation is born, two whole beings walking side by side without losing themselves in each other. This is the love that liberates, the love that transforms, the love that prepares the heart to see the other's shadow without fear. Accepting the shadow of another is perhaps the greatest test of conscious love. Carl Jung said that each person carries an invisible side, composed of fears, anger, jealousy, and desires that the ego tries to hide. It's easy to love what is beautiful. The difficult part is remaining when the darkness appears. True spirituality begins at this point, when you realize that loving someone is also witnessing their humanity in decline. The shadow is not a mistake, it's a mirror. When the other shows their imperfect side, the universe gives you the chance to look at the part of yourself that reacts. What bothers you in the other is often a projection of what you haven't yet integrated. That's why Jung said that relationships are portals to consciousness. They reveal you, they don't protect you. And if you run from the shadow of another, you will inevitably be running from your own. To love consciously is to allow the other to be real, not just ideal. How often do people fall in love with edited versions of each other? Mature love is that which remains even when enchantment gives way to truth. Carl Jung taught that true connection is built when projection falls and the gaze remains, when the ego no longer needs to idealize to feel secure. Spirituality teaches that accepting the shadow is not justifying the mistake, it is understanding the pain. Sometimes the other person screams because they are afraid. Sometimes they withdraw because they don't know how to be vulnerable. Seeing this consciously is not submission, it is lucidity. To love without denying the shadow is to say, I see your light, but also your pain, and I choose to be present. Accepting the other's shadow is the beginning of shared inner alchemy. When two beings decide to look at each other without masks, the relationship ceases to be a stage and becomes a temple. The self emerges, the ego loses power, and love transforms into a path of individuation. It is a love that does not demand perfection, but truth. That does not demand immediate change, but offers presence. Carl Jung said that what heals most is not analysis, but looking without judgment. This gaze is the most spiritual act that exists. Because when you accept the other's shadow, something within you also reconciles. The heart expands, and the bond becomes a mirror of one's own consciousness. And it is in this silent acceptance that love begins to do what it has always wanted, to transform. Carl Jung said that love is the most faithful mirror of the unconscious. No relationship is neutral. All reflect something we need to see, understand, and integrate. True love is not merely comforting, but revealing. When you get close to someone, everything that is still hidden in your shadow begins to manifest. Impatience, jealousy, fear, control, all emerge not as punishment, but as an invitation to awareness. Spirituality calls this inner alchemy, the process of using the bond as an instrument of healing. The ego, however, resists. It wants stability, pleasure, certainty. But the self seeks something deeper. It wants growth. It wants authenticity. And it is precisely this friction between the desire to control and the need to expand that transforms love into a tool for individuation. Love as a mirror doesn't only manifest in grand dramas, it reveals itself in small daily reactions. The tone of voice that irritates you, the silence that bothers you, the attitude that awakens your anger, all are symbolic language of the unconscious. Jung called this projection, seeing in the other what you haven't yet recognized in yourself. When you realize this, something changes. The relationship ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a field of consciousness. Spirituality invites you to observe before reacting, to understand before blaming. Every disagreement is a chance to see the ego in action, and every reconciliation is a chance for the self to emerge. It is in this ebb and flow that the soul grows and alchemy happens. Love as a mirror of transformation doesn't demand that the other person change. It demands that you awaken. Healing doesn't happen when your partner becomes perfect, but when you understand what the mirror is showing you. This is the true purpose of spirituality in relationships, to transform pain into wisdom, shadow into light. Carl Jung stated that individuation is impossible without confrontation. And love is this living, daily, inescapable confrontation. When the ego tries to flee, the self insists on staying, because it knows that it is precisely there, in the imperfection of the human encounter, that the spirit is honed. And when you accept that love came to transform you, not to console you, everything changes. The bond ceases to be a shelter and becomes a portal, and on the other side of that portal, what awaits you is the beginning of something even deeper. There comes a point when the enchantment breaks. That phase where everything seemed magical, perfect, and destined begins to crumble, and that's when true love begins. Carl Jung said that the first phase of every relationship is driven by projection. The ego falls in love not with who the other person is, but with what they represent. We see in the other the strength we lack, the tenderness we repress, the brilliance we've forgotten. Spirituality calls this phase the golden mirror, and it's necessary, but temporary. When the reflection breaks, consciousness begins to emerge. Love ceases to be an illusion and becomes a choice. It's the point where you stop looking for a savior and start seeing a human being with light, shadow, and imperfection. The self begins to guide what was once the domain of the ego, and at that exact moment, love becomes real. When idealization fades, many believe that love has ended. In truth, it has only begun to breathe. The love that survives the end of fantasy is the love born from consciousness. Carl Jung called this symbolic awakening, when projection dies and the bond is reborn under the light of truth. It is in this phase that inner alchemy happens most intensely. The fire of disillusionment burns the ego and purifies the self. Spirituality reminds us that this process is necessary because without the fall of illusion there is no growth. Real love doesn't promise perfection, it offers mirrors. It doesn't intoxicate you with romance, it intoxicates you with truth. And this truth is sometimes harsh, but also liberating. Because only when love ceases to be anesthesia does it become a path. The end of illusion is not the end of love, it's the beginning of freedom. When you accept the other as they are, something within you matures. The ego ceases to demand, the self learns to embrace. The shadow ceases to be a threat and becomes an invitation to real intimacy. Carl Jung said that to love someone is to bear the burden of seeing them as they truly are. This phrase summarizes what conscious love is: presence without idealization. Spirituality shows that by letting the other be, you also allow yourself to be. And when two awakened beings look at each other without masks, the relationship becomes a field of healing, not of neediness. This is the true inner alchemy, transforming disillusionment into wisdom and disappointment into light. And when that light shines, the heart understands that love hasn't ended, it has only changed form. Carl Jung said that no one can truly love without first becoming whole. And that's where most people stumble, because they confuse wholeness with perfection. Wholeness is not the absence of flaws, it's awareness of them. It's recognizing the shadow without being ashamed of it. The individuation process is precisely that. A patient return to the center of the self, where the ego ceases to command and begins to serve. Spirituality shows us that as long as we seek in others what is lacking in ourselves, we will always be condemned to dependence. Real love is born when the heart learns to rest within itself. It's when silence no longer frightens, when loneliness no longer hurts, and when the presence of the other is not a need, but a choice. At that point, love becomes expansion, not refuge. Fullness is the fertile ground where conscious love flourishes. When you reach this state, the bond ceases to be an anchor and becomes an impulse. Carl Jung said that loving is also an act of courage because it requires you to confront your own emptiness. Inner alchemy happens when this emptiness ceases to be a hole and becomes space. Space for life, for the other, for consciousness. True spirituality doesn't teach you to run away from incompleteness, but to transform it into a portal. The ego always wants someone to save it. The self wants someone with whom it can evolve. And it is this difference that separates ordinary love from full love, because full love doesn't ask to be completed, it asks to be shared. Individuation is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of freedom. When a human being becomes whole, love ceases to be a game of mirrors and transforms into communion. Carl Jung saw this as the highest expression of spirituality. Two souls walking side by side without dissolving, united by consciousness and not by need. The ego needs to possess in order to feel secure. The self, on the contrary, trusts. This trust is what makes love complete, because it is born from the experience of having already looked at one's own shadow and survived. And in this state, love does not weaken you, it expands you. It does not imprison you, it awakens you. Individuation is, therefore, the art of loving without losing oneself, of giving oneself without emptying oneself. And it is in this silent maturity that true love begins to touch the spiritual. Spiritual love is not the love of fairy tales. It is the love of those who have awakened. Carl Jung said that when two conscious souls meet, the entire universe reorganizes itself. It's not magic, it's synchronicity. This kind of love is not born from need, but from purpose. It is the expression of inner alchemy manifested on the human plane. Two whole beings, in the process of individuation, choosing to walk together without losing themselves in each other. True spirituality understands that love is freedom. To love someone spiritually is to allow them to follow their path, even when that path no longer passes through you. It is to trust that the bond does not depend on physical presence, but on the communion of consciousness. The ego calls this loss. The self calls it expansion. Conscious freedom within love is the pinnacle of emotional maturity. The ego wants to control. The self wants to flow. Carl Jung taught that spiritual love is the balance between surrender and autonomy, presence and space. It is when the we does not erase the I, and the I does not exclude the we. It is a love that breathes, that does not demand guarantees, but offers truth. Spirituality at this point becomes a living practice, loving without imprisoning, caring without invading, being present without suffocating. Conscious love is like the wind. You don't see it, but you feel its presence in everything. It moves silently, without asking, without demanding, simply existing. This is the freedom that the ego fears, but that the self recognizes as sacred. And it is in this lightness that love ceases to be human and touches the divine. Spiritual love and conscious freedom are the two pillars of the awakened soul. When you learn to love in this way, the relationship ceases to be a contract and becomes communion. Carl Jung said that the encounter between two people is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is a reaction, both are transformed. This is the true inner alchemy, a love that feeds not on fear, but on consciousness. It doesn't bind you to the shadow, it guides you to the light. It doesn't ask for exclusivity, it asks for truth. And when two beings reach this level of presence, love becomes a silent prayer. It doesn't need to be spoken because it is felt. And this feeling is, at the same time, human and eternal, the fusion between freedom and surrender, between the ego that surrenders and the self that awakens. Few understand that true love is a spiritual test. Carl Jung said that nothing reveals more about someone's consciousness than the way they love. Love is the mirror that exposes the ego and at the same time the portal that leads to the self. Loving is easy when everything is in harmony. The test begins when the shadow appears, the others and your own. Spirituality sees love not as a prize, but as a rite of passage. It demands detachment, patience, and humility. It is the field where the unconscious becomes visible, where inner alchemy happens with each conflict, each reconciliation, each silence endured with presence. Love, then, ceases to be an emotion and transforms into an exercise of consciousness. And whoever understands it understands it's not about finding love, but about awakening within it. To love is to be continually tested, not by the other, but by one's own soul. The ego despairs in the face of vulnerability. It wants guarantees, it wants control. But the self flourishes in uncertainty, trusts in surrender, lives in the now. Carl Jung explained that conscious love is that which bears the weight of truth, even when it is uncomfortable. Spirituality in this context becomes a practice of courage. To love is to see what is, not what one would like it to be. It is to accept imperfection without giving up on presence. When the heart awakens, it understands that each challenge within a relationship is an opportunity for expansion. The test is not in remaining, but in remaining lucid. Because true love is not about two who lose themselves in each other, but about two who find themselves within themselves. Love as a test is also love as awakening. When you love without masks, consciousness expands. Carl Jung said that every meaningful encounter has a symbolic purpose. It leads you to see parts of yourself that were dormant. This is inner alchemy in action. The ego is burned by the fire of love, and the self is reborn from the ashes. Authentic spirituality doesn't want love to be easy, it wants it to be true. And true love demands presence, patience, and vulnerability. It forces you to look inward before blaming the other. And in that gaze, something awakens. Love ceases to be a desire and becomes a living, pulsating consciousness. And when this awakening happens, the soul realizes that the test was never about the other. It was always about remembering who you truly are. Carl Jung said that true love is an act of presence. Conscious love doesn't happen all at once. It's chosen every day. It's easy to love when the other person offers you what you want. It's difficult to love when they show you what you haven't yet healed within yourself. Spirituality teaches us that love is a practice, not a promise. It requires inner vigilance, observing when the ego wants to flee, when the shadow tries to take control. To love without fleeing from oneself is to have the courage to remain even when the mirror shows you something uncomfortable. With each look, each silence, each conflict, there is a chance to deepen consciousness. This is inner alchemy in its purest form, transforming the everyday into a field of awakening. And when love is lived in this way, it ceases to be an emotion and becomes a path. To love without abandoning oneself is to not give up on oneself to keep the other. It's knowing how to say yes with an open heart and no with a peaceful soul. Carl Jung said that the biggest mistake in relationships is trying to be what the other person wants, instead of being what one's own soul needs. Individuation is the antidote to this escape. The more you become who you are, the more authentic your love becomes. True spirituality is born from emotional honesty. The ego wants approval, the self seeks truth. When you choose to love without betraying yourself, love ceases to be neediness and becomes awareness. It's the kind of love that keeps you whole, even amidst the storms. And it is in this wholeness that freedom flourishes. The freedom to be, to feel, and to continue choosing, even without guarantees. To love without running away from oneself is, ultimately, a commitment to one's own soul. It is the daily exercise of keeping one's consciousness open, even when the ego wants to protect itself. Carl Jung saw in this the essence of spirituality, to live love as a mirror of one's own individuation. Love doesn't come to complete you, it comes to reveal you. It shows you where fear still exists, where the shadow still governs, where the self still sleeps. And each day that you decide to stay, not with the other, but with yourself, something within you awakens. The inner alchemy is renewed, freedom expands, and the heart learns to love without losing itself. Real love is this, the kind that doesn't make you run away from who you are, but brings you ever closer to your own truth. And it is there, at that point of silent lucidity, that love becomes living consciousness. In the end, true love isn't a prize, it's a mirror. He doesn't come to save you, he comes to remind you of who you are. Carl Jung said that every encounter is an opportunity for individuation, and that love is the most demanding of all, because it forces you to see the ego clearly, to embrace the shadow with tenderness, and to allow the self to lead the way. Spirituality calls this inner alchemy, the process of transforming pain into wisdom and presence into light. Conscious love is a daily choice, a choice to stay when it would be easier to run away, to listen when it would be easier to react, to look at oneself when it would be easier to blame. And it is in this silent choice that freedom flourishes. To love without losing oneself, to give without negating oneself, to see the other without forgetting to see oneself. This is the challenge and also the miracle. So take a breath and ask yourself, does your love awaken you or lull you to sleep? Does it set you free or does it repeat the same pattern? If this video touched you, don't ignore the call. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and continue this journey of awareness and spirituality. Because the love that transforms begins the moment you decide to stop running from yourself.